Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. This is your girl, Marcy Thomas, founder of Brown Girl Collective and the BGC Book Club. And I just want to welcome you into this space again. Now, of course, if you're watching and it's not evening, good morning or good afternoon, based upon where you are. So I am coming to you from the outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia today with a really exciting conversation that I can't wait to get into because it just touches on something that's very important to me and even has some parallels to some things in my own personal story. So I am really excited about that. So please come on in the room as you're coming into the space. If you don't mind, you can let us know if this is your first time joining us, where you're joining us from, if you don't mind. And that way we can all get here and begin to form a time of community and conversation for the day. So tonight I have a very, very special guest who we are actually getting a sneak peek of her book a whole 8 days before it hits the stand. So I'm really excited about that, to be able to get in on it early. So we are going to be talking about The Peach Seed by Anita Gail Jones. And so just to let you know a little bit about Anita, she is a visual artist and writer born and raised in Albany, Georgia, who has worked for many years in San Francisco Bay Area schools as an artist in residence, combining storytelling, visual arts, and writing in K-12 workshops. She is a Hedgebrook alumna and a 2018-19 affiliate artist at the Headlands Center for the Arts. Her debut novel, The Peach Seed, was a novella semifinalist in a William Faulkner William Wisdom Creative Writing Competition and was selected as a 2021 Top 10 finalist in the PEN Bellwether Prize for Socially Engaged Fiction. I know that's a mouthful, but as we get into it, you are really going to understand why I chose the book, as well as why it has won so many awards. So, in advance of me bringing Anita into the room, I want to show you the book trailer that I saw that actually was an encouragement for me to go ahead and make sure that I got her booked for this show. So just bear with me 1 second for technology's sake, and we're going to see why I chose to talk about The Peach Seed. 1 second here. All right, without any further delay, let's welcome Anita Gail Jones. Welcome.
Thank you, Marcy.
Yes, The Peach Seed. So that was exciting, everybody, wasn't it? And actually, I have someone already has made a comment. Phyllis is saying how she's dialing in from Houston. She's reading an arc of The Peach Seed now, enjoying it very much. Hope to have my review ready by the end of the week. Yes.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Yes. Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you. Thank you, Anita. It is such a pleasure to have you here. We have been talking about this for a while, and now it's finally here. It's finally time to
Thank
have
you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Oh yes. Oh
It's
yes.
early opportunity. You're getting in early because I leave tomorrow for New York for the launch. So it's getting real fast.
It's getting real. It is getting real. So that is exciting. So first of all, congratulations, number one. And the fact that this is your debut novel. So how does that feel to just be realizing a dream?
So many feelings. So many. And it is. It sounds kind of trite to say it's a dream come true, but it is. It's hard to get a book out there. And I've been working on this book for over a decade. So it's surreal, it's very real, and it's wonderful. I'm trying to just take it all in and enjoy it because the hard work is paying off.
Yes, it definitely is. And, I told you this before we came on board, that I read a lot. Everybody watches me weekly, hopefully. And if you're not, you can start watching weekly or go back and catch some of the replays. But I have read a lot of books this year. And so far, this is one of my favorites. And that says a lot. It's a testament to your storytelling, your ability to write, a compelling story and just all of that. So I'm really glad that I can have you here to be able to chat with you.
Thank you.
Yes. So for those who may not have had a chance, of course, the trailer tells us some things, but just as a quick synopsis, what is The Peach Seed actually about?
The Peach Seed is a parable, really. It's about how something as small as a seed can ripple through time. So the story takes place over several generations, multi-generational, based in my hometown, Albany, Georgia. The current day is 2012. But it flashes back to the very real civil rights movement that took place in Albany. That was one of my goals, was to uplift that story. And it also flashes further back to an imagined world of the ancestors of the family. So my hope was that as the reader is going through this parallel line of the ancestors' story that goes right alongside the current day story and the flashbacks, would have them wanting to be able to tell the family who they come from. Because the reader gets to know everything.
Yes.
And the family doesn't, of course, because of the what I call the wall of history. So we got a lot of themes going on. As you well know, there are a lot of themes in the book, but that's one of the main things. And then there's a beautiful love story.
Yes.
Between two people who are almost 70. So I really like having a love story that centers the elders.
Yes. Yes, and that is really good as well. My mom usually watches, and Mom, this is another book I'm going to make sure you get because I know that you will love it as an elder. She found love again later in life, so it's always good to see that. And then, as I have mentioned, and why the story really was important to me is that Sapelo Island. That's mentioned in the trailer and talked about in the book is actually where my mother's father is buried. So that means that we have a connection. My mother lives in Southeast Georgia, which isn't too far from where that is. And, I'm currently in Atlanta, as I mentioned. So there are so many things that I could see just in my own story that really, resonated with me. So, of course, you are from Albany. And you talk a lot about Albany in the book, but how much of The Peach Seed is parallel to your own story?
Mostly invented. It's definitely a fictional story. It is not my family story. The peach seed itself, the peach seed monkey, we haven't gotten into that.
Right.
Is something that I do own. I have one, but it wasn't a tradition in my family. We did not carve them. The boys didn't receive them in rites of passage or any of that. That was all invented. But the little monkey is a very real part of my life, and I will get into that a little bit more. So, yeah, I find that people always want to know how much of this is real. Is it real? Is it real? That's always a question. And I get it. I understand that question, but I do want to make it very clear that it is not my story. It is based on an invention. Of course, these characters inhabit the spirit.
Okay.
A lot of people from my past, including my father and my mother and my sister and lots of people, that their spirit is in there in the creation of these very fictional characters.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that, and you said that it took you about a decade to bring it all together, and that's really understandable because a lot of research would have had to go into it. I mean, just that plus just living life, of course.
Yeah.
But, you know, as I was reading, I'm just thinking about that because we're talking 2012, which is in the past. Mm-hmm. We're talking, you know, the 20s, 30s. We're talking, you know, the period of enslavement. There are a lot of different time periods that are covered through the telling of this family story. So what was that process of you know, diving into the historical facts or historical things? How was that process for you?
I love research. The enslavement research was very difficult because you had to keep revisiting and keep rereading and revising those sections. It was really hard. But my goal all along is with the enslavement story was to not only show the horror. We all know the horrors, and we get shown that, in my opinion, more than we need to be.
Right.
But there were also beautiful moments. There were tender moments, so we wouldn't even be here. There were tender moments between humans that also need to be uplifted, and that's where I wanted to focus. The love between people in their cabins after working in the fields, and what it was like to nurture that love in the midst of such horror. You know, they're those opposites that play against each other. So the research was very ongoing and very difficult. Research into the 1960 movement that happened in Albany. I had a very fortunate thing happen. In 2011, I found out that it was going to be the 50th anniversary of the SNCC movement in Albany. It was going to take place that summer in June. So I went back, of course, I had to be there to actually meet people who had lived the lives of these characters that I was inventing. So I went back for that, and it was an amazing, amazing time to interview people that were there and talk about what it was like. And because I was 7 years older in the movement, so I had no idea what was going on. My parents didn't really participate.
Right.
So, but I knew about it, and I knew that it was a story that hasn't been told enough. It's an undertold story. It's not that it's an untold, but undertold. And I wanted to bring that into it also. So that part was just going home a lot and reading a lot of books and talking to people that are still there, like Rutha Harris, who was one of the original freedom singers, is a friend of mine who still lives in Albany. And she's very generous with her memories, and so that helped. And as for Africa, I have not been, but Google Maps is pretty amazing.
Yes.
You can take that little icon and just drop him down in places and walk around and look around and imagine being there. So that part was a lot of fun to me, was just trying to create this world from 1700s on, right, and what it might have been like. What if? I'm answering that question all the time. So the research to me was very rewarding. I love it. And I'm looking forward to where else this will take the story.
Yes, because I mean the story is so powerful, and you know I'm good for saying stuff like this, so we're gonna put it out there. It definitely is worthy of being on film. You know, an epic story, you know, like a Roots or something like that. That because it is such a deep story, and you know, for as much as it is in the book, you know, I could see it on the screen. I really could. So you know, but just to think about family, because really at the root of it, it is like you said, it's a love story. We see the love story play out, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but it is a story about family. Yes, and just thinking about, in this particular case, there is a peach seed monkey, and you can show us yours whenever you're ready, but there is a peach seed monkey that is being passed down through history, through this family that, you know, even people who don't even understand how they know how to do it are able, that there's this inherent skill that they have that's been passed down.
Right. The peach seed monkey, I don't know if people can really see it. I'm going to try. Yeah, there we go.
There it is.
This is the one that I have owned.
Wow.
For a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Really spastic. He has rhinestones for eyes. And it was carved from a peach pit, technically, but I like the word seed because it conjures up growth, and pit plunges you into an abyss. But this little monkey was living in my late sister's jewelry box. Betty Jean Jones was my sister, and we lost her in a plane crash in 97.
Sorry about that.
She was a professor of theater at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, returning from a conference in Las Vegas, and the plane went down before they landed in Detroit. So when I went back to Detroit and to her apartment in Ann Arbor, among her things, I found later, after moving all of her stuff, and I found this beautiful little jewelry box, and inside was this little monkey.
Wow.
Now, when we were young, we had a cousin named Paul Hearns who lived in Youngstown, Ohio. And he carved these monkeys and gave me one, and he gave Betty one. We were young. Maybe I was 10. She might have been 14, something like that. I don't remember the details. But the tail on my monkey broke somewhere along the way. But when I found Betty's, even though she was gone, the little monkey was intact. And there he was with rhinestone eyes.
Wow.
I didn't have those. That was very special. And I was just amazed by it. Many years pass. I'm thinking about this book, trying to figure out what it's going to be about. And this little monkey just jumped right in. That's how I say it. He just jumped. He said, okay, I want to be in that book. He just jumped right in. And I worked him into it and invented the whole carving tradition, which did not exist in my family. I repeat, did not exist in my family. But it's very real for the Dukes family. So that's how it happened. And then it was from there, it's just like you do with any other story. You say, what if? What if this monkey was first carved by the African ancestor from a peach seed that he found on the beach the day he was carried away from his home? What if? So I just kept following the what ifs. And as you know, the monkey has a voice in the book.
Yes.
We won't say too much. We don't want to spoil it for people.
Right.
But that's how the little peach seed monkey came about. And I'll tell you now that it was originally the title for the book.
Oh, okay.
Peach seed monkey for you.
And that's your Twitter handle. For those who are watching but scrolling.
It's still my Twitter handle. But it was the title for the book for many, many, many years. And it served it well because it's very evocative, and people, what is that? They can't really imagine what it is. And it made people want to know more all through the process. But I always knew that I would not publish a book about Black folks with monkey in the title. And we all know why.
Right.
But there are beautiful, beautiful little animals with amazing, amazing intrigue, I think. So that's the story of the peach seed monkey.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that piece and, bringing up, and it does get brought up in the book as well about the whole thing of a monkey. So when we understand that, we've got that off the table.
That's why I put it in there too.
Yes. But one of the things is just really, so many of us nowadays, we're searching, trying to figure out where we come from, who we are. There are a lot of different ways that people are doing that. I did not tell you this earlier, but a couple of years ago, I went through African ancestry and traced my mother's lineage. And I thought it was going to be Senegalese because of her being in that, Georgia, South Carolina area, but it actually turned out to be from Sierra Leone, which there's also a connection because we think of the rice farming and all of those sorts of things that took place in that area, and people from Senegal and Sierra Leone and some of those areas would have known how to come here and work in those areas. But of course, that kind of gave me a maternal lineage, through DNA, but it doesn't tell me specifically who people are.
Right.
But for me, it means a lot because I know, okay, now I can go to Sierra Leone and probably go and see some people that look like me.
Exactly.
But in this case, it's more of a genealogical idea, just tracing genealogy and seeing where that lands, and looking at family trees and things of that nature. But you do also talk about the concept of DNA testing, or why people would or wouldn't pursue DNA testing to find out where they come from.
Yes. I did. I think I did the same one you just mentioned, but many, many years ago. And I tucked it away. I haven't even looked at it since. I want to do it again now that they have even more information, because I don't remember all the details. I felt, I thought I was going to feel really elated at having this information, but it wasn't that enough information.
Right.
I couldn't go to the little village. I couldn't go right there. So it was kind of anticlimactic for me, but I decided to definitely put it into the book, and especially to have Fletcher be reluctant, because a lot of people are, and I think people need to be aware of being cautious about how much you want to know. Of course, we all want to know as much as we can know, but you need to go into it with your eyes open, knowing that I'm not necessarily going to learn only good things.
Right.
And I have to be prepared for that. Not to say you should not know, but just go in with your eyes open is how I think about it.
Absolutely. And I'm not ashamed to say it here. I'm going through a situation like that in part of my family now, where I have not done the one that like links you to cousins and all of that stuff. Now I'm kind of thinking about it. But, the reality of it is, when you do that, there are things that could possibly come up that you weren't expecting to come up. And oftentimes in the case in my family, the people who would have, been the parents of these children are no longer here. So they can't speak for themselves. They can't answer any questions. There's just a lot of things, and wherein in some ways it can provide an answer, it's also going to provide a lot more questions.
Exactly.
In a lot of cases. That's
true.
Right. And you were saying in your family that you've had some similar situations where people may not have wanted to know, or whatever the case may be, that also guided you in your storytelling.
Right. My father was the youngest of 21 children.
Wow.
His father had 2 wives separately. His first wife died, and he married my grandmother. So my dad was the last born of all those kids.
Wow. Okay.
So he had nieces and nephews that he grew up with, more like sisters and brothers. He was the baby uncle. And one of his nephews, who lived to be in his 90s, had a really good memory. And I interviewed him quite a bit before he died and learned as much as I could. But as I said, there's not a lot to learn, because it's just a big question mark. But it was interesting to me that there were people in the family that didn't want him to talk. They knew he knew what he was talking about, but they didn't want him to talk. So they would say that he was a liar, that you shouldn't listen to him. And this is within a family. These are close family people. But I was always willing to talk to him and find out what he knew and verify things with the census records. He had an amazing memory about who lived next door to who and how many kids they had and all this kind of stuff. So we have to respect the truth. Sometimes it's not what we want to hear, but it's the truth.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things in this story, it kind of starts out that, Fletcher Dukes runs into his old love at the grocery store. Well, kind of runs into her, but doesn't. She doesn't. They don't connect. Right. But it stirs up the whole thing of the relationship that they had. And then, just a lot of other things that we're not going to talk about because we want you to read the story.
Right.
But it is the entry point into beginning to learn about this Dukes family and learning more about their history, and and watching what happens between Fletcher and Altovise. Which, when I saw that name, I was like, oh, that was the name of Sammy Davis's wife.
That's right. That's right. You know that. A lot of people don't know that.
Wow.
Yeah.
But yes, just to see how, back in the time in the 60s, they're growing up and they are a part of a movement. They're friends, they're, growing up together, fall in love, whatever the case may be. And just the things that they experienced, and how, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes there are people who want to willingly be a part, or who wanted to willingly be a part of the movement. And then there were others that were more apprehensive about being in the movement. So just talk a little bit about that, being able to tell, kind of both parts of how that story would have played out.
Being involved and not involved, you mean?
Right.
Yeah. It's very interesting to me in doing the research and finding out how few people were involved, and how hard the people that were involved had to work, because there weren't that many people involved. So it was a very intense time. Dr. King came down from Atlanta to help desegregate Albany. And all my life, as I've heard about the Albany movement, it was considered a failure. It went down into history as a failure, because he didn't achieve his goal of desegregating the city. But it had a lot to do with the tactics that were used. And later, Dr. King admitted that they were too broad in their approach. They needed to be more narrow and focus on one or two things instead of trying to do too many things. Mm-hmm. But it also had to do with the fact that Laurie Pritchard, the chief of police, was very savvy in his approach. Mm-hmm. He studied Gandhi as well as King to learn about nonviolent protest. And then he adjusted accordingly. Mm-hmm. And that played a huge role in taking the wind out of the sail of the movement. Because, for example, the tactic was to protest, get arrested, fill up the jails, get some leverage. What he did was not put anyone in jail inside the city limits. He rented jail space in 50-mile radius of Albany, so that the jails never filled up, and so that there was no leverage. So this kind of tactic just wears people down, because you're going to get back out there and you're going to protest and you're going to get arrested. You're in this thing for the cause, but you can only take so much. So over and over again, the tactics weren't working as well as they had hoped they would work. And Dr. King, coming down from Atlanta, of course, brought the notoriety and the cameras and all of that. And when he left, all of that left also. Mm-hmm. People in Albany kept working. They never considered it a failure. They're working to this day in different ways. So it was interesting to dive into all of that and find out just how much was at risk for people. Very young people, of course. The young people were at the front of the movement. Albany State College, now university. Students that went there were risking their lives and their careers, their college careers, to be in this movement. And several of them were expelled from Albany State for participating. So the history is very rich. And when you start diving into it, you see that it was something that only young people would be the ones to do. And I was very touched by the fact that before a protest, a lot of the young people, we're talking about 16, 17, 18-year-olds, would write their last will and testament before going out to protest. I would like to think that I would be that brave and that courageous. And there were so many stories like that. And it was really, it was uplifting to me, having grown up there, to bring these stories to light in the book in the way that I did. And it still is for me a sense of pride.
Absolutely, because I'm not originally from Atlanta, but I live in the Atlanta area. You hear about Atlanta, things that happen in Atlanta. You hear about things that happen in Alabama, which is like very close, to where you were in Albany, as well as not that far from Atlanta. But I can honestly say I never really heard about the stuff that was happening in Albany, and I just think that it's important that we do know. I mean, yeah, there are certain places, and you mentioned some of them in the book, like Greensboro and the lunch counters, just a lot of places that we are familiar with. But to understand that this movement was going on in a lot of different places, and that it was, a small number of brave souls. Because I've often heard people say, yeah, people, they shout about King now, but they weren't following him like that. They weren't on board, like that during the actual, period of the civil rights movement. So it's not what you might think that it is.
That's right. That's right. And the working with people that are still alive and still have very strong memories about what happened then. People were on, like you're saying, people were on different sides of the argument and not agreeing with King all the time. He has become quite an icon, of course, rightfully so, but there are many people who had different opinions about the way things should be done. Should it be going through the courts, or should it be action on the streets, and all kinds of differing opinions about how to do things. And the thing about what happened with King, after he left Albany, he took what he learned there. That was the other part about the Albany movement being very crucial to the wider civil rights movement in this country. He took what he learned on to Birmingham and beyond.
One of the other things that you talk about in the book with Altovise specifically is the fact that she's a musician. And, I loved, hearing about her as a musician and the things or reading about her as a musician, and how she, was using her voice in a different type of way as such. And, at one point being up in Michigan, which wasn't necessarily in Motown, but in and around.
Yes, close enough.
Close enough, because one of the things I don't know if I mentioned it since we've been on here, but I spent some time living in Detroit. So that's what said this book.
I've lived so many places.
I have. Well, I was in the Air Force for 7 years. And then, I think I'm settled now, but for a long time I was on the go. And then, having family in different places. But just to know about her and, that she was a woman who, made some choices. Yes, she was there in Albany, but then she decided to make a change for her own life. And that's another thing. We oftentimes hear of people who had to make different decisions, to move away, to go to school, or, whatever the case may be. So just talk a little bit about that aspect of it, showing people who decided that for whatever reason they didn't want to be there at the time.
That's always an interesting issue. Who stayed and who went, who left, and why. And I have Fletcher and one of the other characters kind of dive into that. The reasons, a lot of times the reasons for people to leave are very dire and serious, and not just made on a whim. And that was the case for Altovise for sure. I met a woman in 2011 when I told you I went back to Albany for the civil rights, the SNCC anniversary. And I gave a little synopsis of the book to this woman, and she said, I did that. I did that. I said, yeah, I'm sure you did. A lot of people this will resonate, because a lot of people did the things I have these characters doing. But she was just she got very animated about about the fact that she left, not why she left. We didn't get into all of that. But some people, they look at it and they feel like people have to take sides. I've seen this before too. You left, I stayed.
Right.
And there's some tension around that for them.
Right.
Other people just say, to each his own. You left, I stayed. And that's what we have with Fletcher and Altovise. He stayed, she left. Now she's coming back. So it was very interesting to get into that, to start unpacking why people leave and why they stayed. and then have 50 years pass and reflect on that.
Right. And I mean, that is true, because a lot of people do leave and they end up coming back for whatever reason, because you find out, that living up north isn't necessarily, what you think is going to be. There are still, there's still isms, racisms, and all these other. It just shows up. It may show up a little bit differently, but it still exists.
Yeah. And oftentimes shows up in exactly the same way. But you're having a mindset about it because, wait a minute, I'm up north. Why is this happening? Well, there it is.
And there is a part in the book, I can't remember specifically, but you were talking about certain artists that were like the Freedom Singers. Oh, and as you mentioned the Freedom Singers in the book, and color names like Bernice Johnson Reagan. I was like, I know who that is.
Yes. Yes.
So that I love that about the book as well, is that even though it's it's fictionalized, you do also incorporate like some real people into the story as well, just as a part of telling the truth of what was going on.
Yes, the Freedom Singers, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned Rutha Harris. My friend Rutha still lives there, and Bernice Johnson Reagan, her dad baptized me. He was
wow.
I went to the church where her father was the minister, Reverend Johnson. Yeah, he baptized me. So I've known her all my life. And then Sweet Honey and the Rock was just, they were a rock.
Yes.
And or are, I should say, that they're still going on, I believe. So I really wanted to include that, to have that intersection of fact and fiction, and to drop these characters, a fictional character like Altovise, and have her learn from the very real Freedom Singers, learn how to recast songs, Negro spirituals as protest songs, to take the lyrics and tweak them from the jail cells. And that stuff is very rich to me, and it really needs to be known that this is how it happened. And there, as with anything, there are certain names that you hear about with the movement, and then there's so many that you've never heard of.
Right.
And I worked to include some of those folks.
Right. One of the other things that really stood out to me in this story, in the passing down of the peach seed monkey, we talk a lot about legacy and, rites of passages and things like that within family. And, in there, a little bit of misogyny shows up.
Yeah.
Wherein, just a little bit, where you have this thing of, I'm not going to give it all away, but where the peach seed monkeys are carved and passed down to sons, but not daughters.
That's right.
So how interesting was it for you to kind of take that perspective and dive into that?
Yeah, well, first of all, every story's got to have its trouble. So as a writer, you're always looking for places to create trouble.
Right.
And that was just a no-brainer and an obvious place, because these kinds of things do happen. And so it was an opportunity, and I loved having that opportunity to create that tension between Fletcher, who ends up with 3 daughters, right, wanted nothing but sons. And so, okay, now what?
Right.
How he dealt with that, and how his late wife was around it, and how his sister was around it, and how the new family, Bodie, the younger generation, is dealing with it. So that was fun. I liked doing that because it's very rich and real. And I think families need to do that. They need to just kind of unpack this stuff and bring these things up. I think his late wife, Melitha, I gave her the line where it's a wonderful tradition and everything, this peach seed monkey tradition you got, but it is, after all, a choice.
Right.
And you can change it.
Right. That's true. Oh, when you just said that, it reminded me of a line in, what was the name of that movie? It's on the tip of my tongue. Eddie Murphy.
Coming to America? No.
Yes, Coming to America. There was something something like that, Coming to America, where he's like, he has to marry an African queen. And, And the mom is like, "But he doesn't love that girl," you know. And he's like, "Well, it's tradition." She's like, "Well, you're the king, aren't you? You can break the tradition."
There you go. Same thing. Yeah, lovely. A lovely analogy. I like that.
Yes, you can break that tradition. So that is something, because sometimes things, like in the case, a person thinking they're going to have sons and they have a bunch of daughters, or vice versa, and just navigating those things, and the relationships. I mean, there's just so much. There's no way in the time that we have that we could touch on everything that this book touches on from a historical standpoint, as well as the things in terms of families and how families relate to one another, and how they work through tough times and challenging situations. Because, like, for example, you mentioned Bo D, who's in the younger generation, and there are some things that he is dealing with and going.
Oh yes, Bo D. He is. I like to think of Bo D being the younger generation of the men that are centered in this book. I see him very much. There's an arc that starts in Africa with Malik, and in this story it ends in South Georgia with Bo D. So we can see this arc happening in the story, and he is. I really like Bo D. I don't have any favorites. I will not say that I have favorites, but he was just an opportunity. He really challenged me.
I would think so.
That boy, I'm gonna tell you, that boy challenged me. He was quite an interesting character to write, because he was torn between these worlds and being addicted. But he's very talented. He has a lot of interest and a lot of potential. And so it was a challenge to just bring him, to corral him. Like, hey, be still long enough for me to write it, please.
Right.
And get him down there. But I was very happy with the way he turned out on the page, because it was due to some very creative editing on the part of my editor, Powers, and my agent, Steve Ross. They helped me a lot with some of the logistics that needed to be ironed out. And I'm always grateful to my husband, Rob Rorick, who's been my first reader, and he reads from a male point of view and gave me a lot of pointers on, I mean, I'm not quite like that, but maybe like this. So Bo D he was a challenge, but there he is on the page.
And what I like about the inclusion of him, because I mean, you could have focused on the elders and the story, and he could have just been a bit character, really. But I like the fact that you do talk about him, because it causes those of us who are reading it, in real time, to really think about the younger generation, because so many times we may see people acting out in certain ways, or things that we just don't understand, and we may want to push them aside or label them, or just say, oh, because how older people are. Oh, them young kids today, da 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 da.
Yes.
But but not having a willingness to like really dig deeper and dive in, and even though it's not necessarily initially happening with his family, because we as the reader get to watch him go through certain things. Right. It gives us a level of understanding about what's happening with him.
Yes. And you never know what's going on in someone's life. It's easy to, from your point of view, to just dismiss things, but you need to understand. And that's, to me, one of the beauties of fiction, is those magical moments between a reader and a character, when something cracks open and you're actually up in the head of that person. That's just pure magic to me. And this is, nothing else gives you that opportunity, not film, not stage, to just go inside the head of somebody and find out who they are in their tenderest moments, in their most vulnerable moments. And to me, that is where fiction can actually change lives, I think. And you can attack me for that if you want to, but I truly believe that someone reading this book who has never been to South Georgia, never been in a Baptist church, never eaten soul food or any of this stuff in the 10% of the iceberg that everybody sees, they read a book and they get inside the head of a character like OD, and maybe if they're open to it, they can get some understanding.
Right.
And
And
that
I'm
would be my hope.
And I'm gonna be honest with you, I always say that when I read something, some people are like, oh, I just like to read just for the sake of reading as escapism. And I'll be like, yeah, there's a piece of that. But for me, I love to be able to take something away from something that I read, because it is an investment, if you buy the book, it's an investment of your time, of your money, I should say. It's an investment of your time to dive into it. So for me, even if it's just one or two things, I always want to be able to take something away from what I'm reading. So I agree with you on that, to be able to really get into characters in a way that maybe you might not in, a 90-minute film, because even though I said earlier, I believe film, I don't believe it should be a 90-minute film. I believe it should be more like a mini series for the Peach Seed. I'm just putting it out there. So whoever's listening,
let's put it out there. Everybody.
If it's not already in the works, I'm putting it out there.
Thank you.
Because,
I think.
Yeah, to be able to really dive in and really, as I said, to have an understanding. And of course, there are other characters. We don't have time to really dive that deep into all of the characters. And plus, the whole point is for you to read the book.
Yeah.
But it's just powerful to see what is happening in this family, from Fletcher, to Altovise, who is his long lost love, who returns to his life. And there's some things that happen with them, which we're not going to talk about.
Let's just say she's bringing some baggage with her.
Yes, she's bringing some baggage. Yes. And there's this discovery that will happen, as far as that's concerned, as they try to rebuild. But then that brings up something too. Just the whole fact that sometimes, you might have that high school sweetheart or that childhood sweetheart, and for whatever reason, y'all go your separate ways, and then you come back together. I mean, sometimes it can be a good thing, and sometimes maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is an area of this book where people of my generation, the baby boomers, they love the love story part. The people, I always, whenever I do a synopsis, I always mention that and go, oh, and do they get back together? It's like, well, you got to read the book. I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to spoil it for you. You have to read it. And through all of the iterations and the edits, and there was always a line like this arrow going through that stayed the same. And I would veer away from it, but always come back to it. And it is very much Altovise and Fletcher. What's going on with them is this through line. And those two, they just kept me going. Whenever I was just kind of ready, just my forehead was bleeding onto the keyboard because I'm working so hard. There's something about Fletcher and Altovise's love for each other and the fact that it survived even without them trying.
Right.
So that just kind of blew my mind. And it's not that it's total fiction. It can happen. It really can happen. It does happen with people. And it happened with these two wonderful fictional folk that they gave me hope.
Yes. And that's really, I'm glad you used that word at the end of the day. That's what I really got from the story. Because I mean, of course, there's peaks and valleys and ups and downs and stuff. And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening, or I can't believe it went this way, or I can't believe that, so-and-so said that, or, whatever the case may be. But, at the end of the day, there's hope.
That was my hope, was that there would be hope in the story. And that's part of, I think, when I mentioned that through line, that arrow, it's just wrapped in hope. It's right there, and it's why we survived.
Yes,
we survived the horrors of the Middle Passage. I mean, the stuff that went on, I'd have to take breaks from the research and just not go there or do something else, or because it's just horrifying when you get into some of the actual accounts and the slave narratives, and to see that humans can be that heinous, that horrible, is very hard. So I would have to cling to that hope to get through,
Mm-hmm.
to literally get through to the end of the book. You gotta have it, because otherwise, what is it? I mean, why have you written it? Just
That part.
chronicle the horror? No. You want to showcase that hope and that glimmer that the peach seed represents,
Mm-hmm.
and show that and hold that up, because we need to be holding up something else.
Right.
Life is just really, even in 2023 now, it's the stuff that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Where would we be without hope?
Yes, holding on to a glimmer of hope. And along those lines, because this book does have a historical backdrop, I know that it's important to continue to tell those stories, even in a space where people are trying to drive these stories out of the mainstream. So, what would be your thought or suggestion? And I know this is a loaded question, but ways that we, you are an artist, you are, a writer, you are a storyteller, but for those of us who may not sit in that seat, what is the best thing that we can kind of do to make sure that stories are still being uplifted and upheld and not being pushed to the side?
Communication, whatever form that you want to take. If it means talking to your next door neighbor who does not share your views necessarily, you're going to find something that you can agree about, and you can start there. And I don't know how you get to that thing necessarily. I don't know how close you are to your neighbor, or in speaking terms or not, but I find that even the people that think they have nothing in common can find some common ground. And I think that's what we should be looking for, even with people we don't, that have voted for the wrong person.
Right.
Common ground. We can find some common ground and nurture that ground. Plant some seeds right there in that ground that you found, that you share.
Mm-hmm.
And because as long as you keep going into your house, closing your door, closing your garage door, and doing your stuff in your house, getting in your car, driving away, and not talking to each other, it nurtures a different kind of ground that's not fertile and not good for us. So common ground, finding ways to communicate within common ground, I think is the way to do it. And if you're an artist, obviously you have your art to do that with, but there is also another art, the art of conversation.
Yes, like we're doing right now.
Right. And we can all be a part of that in whatever way we communicate, whether it's sign language or in other ways. The art of conversation can be a savior, I think, for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And something that's just, kind of like thinking back to the movement, finding ways that we can be involved. Of course, everybody is not going to go and, march on the state's, legislators' steps. Everybody's not going to do that. Everybody is not necessarily going to go to the school board meetings. But, if there's a petition you can sign, if there's a way to, keep buying the books that they're trying to ban, buy them anyway. And
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that is a really, really good point. And this whole business about banning books, the opposite end of that is pre-ordering books.
Yes.
That I never understood the importance. I mean, this is not just a sales pitch, although I do want you to pre-order.
Yes. It'll be out next week on 8/1. So
that's right. It'll be out. Still pre-ordering. Pre-orders are important, but a pre-order is a vote. Mm-hmm. You are voting for the ideas that writer is bringing forth in the book. You're saying these ideas deserve a place at the table. I'm reading these ideas. If you don't buy the book and you don't show that this is worthy, the industry, they're in business to make money. So show them that you're going to buy the book. Mm-hmm. Or make sure that the library buys it. If you can't afford to buy it, go to your library and say, you need to have this book on the shelf. This book is worthy. Mm-hmm. So in that way, everything's political. You know that. So it's important that these ideas, even more than ever, here we are in 2023, people are banning books. Even more than ever, we need to be supporting the ideas that we believe in, wherever they show up. And in books is a really important place to support them.
Right. And as you said, the thing about libraries, people may not even realize that that's something that they can do. Like if you live in a community, go to your library's website, and usually a lot of times they may ask for, you can donate and suggest that they buy certain books, or you can just suggest that they buy certain books, either way, whatever works for you. But, making sure you do that. Or, if you're in a position to buy books, there's all these little free libraries out there. Buy some books and stuff.
We have a little free library. We've had it since 2017. I love them.
Yes, because actually, I'm saying this, and this is a first for a lot of people. They've never heard me say this, not even in my family. One of my dreams would be for Brown Girl Collective to pick certain communities around the country and set up little free libraries that, the Brown Girl Collective or BGC Book Club would do that and fill them with books, by, for, and about Black women, Black men as well, because I don't discriminate, but this space is generally about Black women. But to be able to just do that, because understanding that, the person who may not go to a library or have access to a library, or who can't buy a book on their own, that there's a space that they can go and find them. So
I love that idea.
Dream of mine. So.
Do it.
Yes. So Anita, I am so grateful, so thankful that you were able to join me. I know you've got a week of excitement ahead, heading out tomorrow to go to NYC to really launch the book and things like that. So are there, besides, going and pre-ordering, and of course y'all can do that wherever you buy your books, looking at, independent booksellers, of course, because we want to support them as much as possible. And if they don't already have it, once again, suggest that they get it, things like that. But where your launch, but are there any spaces or places where people can check you out?
Yes. So launch day is a week from tomorrow. It's August 1st, and I will be in New York. And what I'm doing for launch day, I'm calling it Anita's NYC book signing trek. Okay. I'm going to be hopping around the city where various bookstores from Harlem to the East Village, signing books, meeting booksellers, meeting readers that happen to be there. And I will have my schedule posted on my website and also on social media, so people will be able to follow. And if they're in the area where the bookstores that I'm going to, I hope they will come by so that I can meet them and personalize their books, and we can have a little chat before I hop off to the next bookstore. So that's my launch day event, is several little events up and down the borough of Manhattan.
Well, that sounds really great. And of course, as I was telling you, Anita, earlier, and everyone can see all of her social spaces and things like that are at the bottom, so you can follow and be able to see what's going on there in terms of her activities. And I know I mentioned, the pre-orders and all of those things, but there is another place that you can go. I actually do have a bookstore through Bookshop. So if you go to Brown Girl Collective bookstore, you just type it in that way, and it's actually attached to Bookshop, and you can purchase the book there as well. And I get a little credit for it.
Lovely. I didn't know about this. I'm glad to know about it, Marcia.
Yes. I don't always mention it, and I guess sometimes I need to say more.
Yes, you do. This is great.
But that is another option for those, because some people may not like the one that starts with an A for a variety of reasons. So, but that is another space, and that supports the work that I do if you purchase things there. And pretty much everybody that I've talked to, unless their book is not available at Bookshop, everybody that I've ever talked to is in that store. So that's another option if you would like.
Very good. Thank you for doing that.
Yes. Well, everyone, especially you, Anita, I thank you again so much. I know you got to get ready to get out of there, leave California and head on over to the East Coast tomorrow. So I'm really excited for you. I thank you for allowing me the honor of being one of the first to actually have a conversation with you.
Timing of this was perfect, really, because tomorrow we go, and this was a great send-off. I really appreciate. I'm glad that this time worked for you and for me, and I appreciate this. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you're enjoying the book if you're reading it, and that you'll give it a chance if you're not.
Right. Yes. Please give it a chance because it's a very powerful book. And like I said, and I don't say it lightly because y'all know I read a lot. It is one of my favorite books thus far this year. So I'm really glad to be able to support Anita in her endeavors and look forward to whatever's next after this. So. All right. Well, everyone, Anita, I'm going to let you go and I'm going to let you off screen for a moment. Okay. I'm going to make a quick announcement, but please don't hang up because I do want to say a proper goodbye. So, all right. Okay. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this wonderful conversation about the peach seed. As we were talking about, please support the book. Please, go and grab a copy from wherever you choose to grab a copy from and, support Anita in her work because I know that this is just the beginning of other great things for her as a published writer. So just by means of what's happening next, let me get my right screen. Next week, I will be back with another novel from, let me get that bottom off of there. Hold on, y'all. Give me 1 second. Next week, we will be back with Promise from Rachel Eliza Griffiths. It is her first novel. She is a poet as well, but it'll be her first novel. She'll be here to talk about Promise with us next week. So please come back and join us for that conversation as well. And between now and then, everybody have a great week. Stay cool if you're in a hot spot like I am here in Atlanta. And then please enjoy your summer and pick up all of the wonderful books by Black women writers. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.